It's my pleasure to introduce the next inductee, the very vivacious Andria Hill. Andria was a student at King City Secondary School from the years 1971 to 1976. She says she's always had a passion for storytelling, the theater, and she would like to, and I'm sure she'll do this on her own, but she mentions Charles Truax as being a very important person in fostering her whole love of the theater and the English language. She said that his warmth, his humor, and his insights were invaluable in helping her along the way. When Andria, she also mentions her mother, who was a writer herself, and used to give her writing assignments to do during the summer holidays. Can you imagine? However, it must have worked. After King City, she attended Glendon College for several years. Left York University and decided to travel throughout Europe and to find out what life was all about. And in actual fact, she did not return to her education until she was a single mother and had attained the age of 30. And at that time, she went to the university in Acadia to study theater arts and to receive her Bachelor of Arts. She also stayed on after that to receive her MA in English. She talks about being inspired by the annual KCSS trips to Stratford Festival. And when she was down in, or where she lives in the Atlantic provinces, she is a group of 5 people who created the Atlantic Theatre Festival, which is in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. She's also been involved with various heritage and cultural groups, including the Joseph Howe initiative to remember the man who brought responsible government to Nova Scotia. She returned to school again in 2003 to complete a Master of Education in Counseling, graduating in October 2004. She has made her home in Nova Scotia since 1985, where she discovered a more sane pace of life. She has a strong sense of community, a rich resource of untold stories, and some fascinating characters. She's a great believer that to take things lightly and to take things seriously are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Andria, I find you to be a very worthy recipient to be part of our Case of Distinction, and it's my pleasure to induct you into the Case of Distinction.
I too will pass up on the mic, because if I used a mic, well, my trainers in theater would never forgive me. When I first found that my parents were planning to leave Toronto to move to King City, a place I'd never heard of and could never find on a map, I was appalled because I felt I would miss out on so much. You know, you're leaving Toronto, it's a happening place, it's a lovely place. And I came here to this high school, and over the next 5 years, I had a sense of community, a sense of people that still sustains me. Now, at the time I was in high school, I didn't realize that. I wasn't aware of that. It wasn't until I went out and was looking for a place to live and centered in Nova Scotia and realized that the little community of 3,800 in which I live was very much like King City Secondary School. I mean, it had the good things and the bad things were exactly the same. What's the good thing about living in a small town? Everybody knows you. What's the bad thing about living in a small town? everybody knows you. So thankfully that there are a lot of other places that I can go to get away to have a little privacy, you know. Take a back route to go to the post office on the days when I don't want to get into late conversations with people. My time at King City, again, I have 6 children of my own, and I've seen my kids go through the school system. I have 3 who are still left in the public school system. I listen to the things that they talk about, the people that they describe, their frustrations, and especially coming here today, you know, reflecting on what my kids talk about in school or about their school experiences. And I realize that there are phrases that we use now. I'm kind of appalled and upset to find out that school is no longer about education, it's more about marketing placement. You know, you've got brand and you've got phrases and you sell it on this. So I hear a lot of phrases, especially because I live at Acadia University and we have one of the P3 schools, the Horton schools, and it's all about placement and marketing. And so I hear things like lifelong learning. Acadia has a center for lifelong learning for people who want to take courses after they're 50. And my response to lifelong learning is, well, if you're not learning, somebody better check for a pulse because you're dead. The other thing is student-centered learning. I like that one, student-centered learning. And I know what I know what my kids take that to be, but I reflect back on my experience here at KCSS, and I think all I knew was student-centered learning. There were people who affected my life here who never taught me a class. Ron Bonham, for one. The man was heart and soul, and everybody loved him, and you just were attracted to him because he exuded warmth and compassion and empathy. There was Dr. Ed Samarica, who I took grade 13 biology with, and it was a little bit too much for me. Academically, I was not scientifically inclined. I was interested in what he was doing, but I just couldn't keep up in the academics. So I dropped the course, and I remember being in the cafeteria one day, and Dr. Samarica coming down to me and saying, "We're doing this particular section today, and I thought you might find it interesting, so why don't you come in and sit on the class?" That was just blown away. I felt honored. I felt also extremely humble, you know, because I'm not that smart. At least that was my perception of myself. But he made it possible for me. It wasn't that it was no longer a classroom and a subject. These were not lines and delineations. It was interdisciplinary. It flowed back and forth, and that has very much stayed with me. And Charles Truax, grade 10, I didn't realize, we were just talking. My first year here at King was his first year here at King. Of course, you walk through the doors as a student, you think everybody's been here forever. You know, they sleep here in the summer. You know, they put them in the lockers and they take them out of mothballs, shake them out. But it was our first year, and that also influences now because he was also my grade 10 English teacher. And he taught me in grade 13, and I still have the piece of paper that he gave me on an evaluation of my writing assignment. My major writing assignment for English A, which was on the life of, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Yes, one-woman show, that was my first play that I wrote. But I also remember his classroom because he was not dogged about sticking to the lesson plan. So if a discussion began and it was slightly on topic and kind of went off on a tangent, and I seem to remember something about Plato's cave, and the entire class took off in another direction. And he did not sit back and rap on it and say, "Okay, people, you know, focus, let's get back." He let it go. And it was one of the most amazing discussions I had ever experienced. And that, too, is what I think of as student-centered learning. That's what lifelong learning is about. And when I hear politicians talking, you know, for the sake of political expediency, talking about curriculum, with absolutely no attention to pedagogy because they really don't know what they're talking about. I come back to my experience here and think, no, there is another way of being, there is another way of existing in the world, another way of teaching people. And I'm kind of sorry that my kids don't seem to be having that experience. Perhaps reflecting in years to come, they will. But this was my first sense of community, and it has been a rich experience and one that I treasure, one that I value. And I also learned, I have to say, Linda was a French teacher here, but she was my phys ed teacher. And talk about empathy and compassion and warmth. But we also didn't get away with anything. I mean, Linda knew when it was real and when you were just trying to whinge at a phys ed class. But she too, I mean, my memories of her are tremendous. And George Gould, who I'm sorry is not here because I was going to say, through George I learned the power of one. And the power of one was that all I had to do was catch his eye in French class, stick my finger up and go like this, and he would start to laugh because he knew I'd be like, A gracious good morning, Mr. Gould. Is it the party to whom I am speaking? Anyway, so if you see George, and actually Sarah, she said you're going to play golf with him. Tell me you missed it. Anyway, thank you so much. This is a tremendous honor.